I'm Sanya Richards-Ross, four-time Olympic gold medalist, and in 2008, I had an abortion. Because I wasn't ready to be a mom, I was still passionately chasing my childhood dreams.
My name is Dr. Yeni Abraham, and I'm a doctor of pelvic physical therapy. In 2021, I had to have an abortion to save my life.
I'm MJ Acosta-Ruiz, I'm a journalist, and in 2004, I had an abortion because I did not have the financial means to support a child.
And the Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade has been overturned.
Welcome to another episode of Uncomfortable Conversations with Emmanuel Acho. Once again, it appears our world is growing further apart instead of closer together. So in this uncomfortable conversation, my intention is to ease the tension. And while we may not be swayed, hopefully through listening, you'll feel heard. And while we may disagree, we can collectively live in harmony. I'm joined by Pastor Chelsea Smith, TV host MJ Acosta, Olympic gold medalist Sanya Richards-Ross, and Dr. Yeni Abraham. For many women, an abortion is either their best kept or, depending on how you look at it, their worst kept secret. Why is now the time for you to share your story?
The moment I saw the news pop up on my phone, I thought of my past self, of that moment. And for the first hour, I felt sorrow for the women who are now in a situation where they feel helpless and who don't know where to turn and who think that there is no option for them. And it shatters the deepest part of my soul for them. So this is the time, if not now, when?
Take me back to the moment in which you had to make that very difficult decision of having an abortion, and how are you feeling now in light of the Supreme Court's decision?
Yeah, I was about barely 20 years old. I think I had just turned 20 years old, and I had just dropped out of college. So very much a point in my life where I was lost. My parents are immigrants. They immigrated to this country well into their 30s, leaving behind very good careers in their homeland for opportunities for me. So there was so much going on at that point in time where I felt like I was already letting them down in so many different ways. And then I found out that I was pregnant. And I just remember thinking, my parents did not do all of this to bring me here for me to now bring a child and for them to be in poverty, for them to suffer, and for me to suffer along with them. And so I very quickly decided that abortion was the way for me to go.
How difficult was that decision?
There was a little back and forth because I remember when I went to go confirm whether or not I was pregnant, I had somewhat told my mom, like, my period is late, I don't know what to do. And I saw the result, and instinctually she called me, like, did you find out? And I lied. And I said, no, I'm not pregnant, Mom. And the relief in her voice to hear, wow, okay, she's gonna be okay. She doesn't, that further affirmed. By the way, my family has no idea that I ever had an abortion, that I ever did this.
What do you mean when you say your family has no idea?
They don't know that I ever had an abortion. It was the first time I've probably ever said it out loud in a public forum.
Thank you.
Outside of the people in this room, less than a handful of people know in my life that I did it.
Thank you for sharing that.
It was just such an overwhelming thing to do at that age, but I remember thinking, this is exactly what I need to do. Along those lines, I think, I'm curious, Pastor Chelsea, in approach, because now I will have to have a conversation with my parents, but now how do I approach this conversation with them?
MJ.
That's a good question.
I will answer as a mom.
Mama Chelsea.
Chelsea, I like that.
I bet your mom's first response is going to be, I can't believe you kept this from me for all these years. I can't believe you carried this pain on your own without inviting me into it.
She's not the one I'm most concerned about, to be honest. It's my dad. He's very old-fashioned, very old school, if you will. So he's the one I'm more anxious about. Not fearful, because he's my father. He loves me deeply and he will support me, I know, ultimately. But I think he will be very confused.
What advice would you give MJ before having that hard conversation?
I completely identify with what you're saying and understand. I didn't tell my dad until I got ready to write my book.
Wow.
Dad,
Wow.
Yep, my dad had no idea. I'll never forget. It was actually a lot easier a conversation than I ever anticipated.
Wow.
You know, I went to him and I was in the room and I remember I just started crying immediately. Like I just felt so much pain, shame, hurt, and everything. And I said to him, Dad, I never told you this before, but the day before I went to Beijing, I had an abortion. He said, what? Just like, he's like, and you didn't tell me? And you didn't tell me? And then I could see his wheels turning. He was like, that's why you didn't, you know, it's like he just started to literally live the experience for me all over again. And my heart broke. And so, yeah, you know, he loved on me, he hugged me, we had a moment, and I told him what I wanted to do with the book, and he encouraged me. He was like, baby girl, he's like, everything we go through in life is for a reason. And if you just help one woman out there, it's worth it. And it was a much easier conversation than I anticipated, and I was afraid for many years to tell him about it for a lot of reasons, but I have an amazing father, and he showed up for me then.
2008,
Yep.
you were the Olympic favorite.
Yeah.
You literally did not lose one race throughout the duration of that regular season,
Yeah.
if you will. You were headed to Beijing, where the Olympics were to take place, and you had to make one of the toughest decisions of your life. Can you take me to that moment?
Some young girls might think of like their wedding day and, you know, have all these different kinds of dreams. But from the age of 9, the one sole dream that always felt very real to me was becoming an Olympic champion. For me, in that moment, when I found out I was pregnant, right before I left for Beijing, I felt like I was in an impossible situation because I knew I was with my forever. I was with my soon-to-be husband. I knew I wanted to have a family with him. But I also wanted to be an Olympic champion more than anything. The day before I left for Beijing, I had an abortion. And as a woman who also identifies as a Christian woman, who tries to be Christ-like, I never ever thought that I would be in that situation. It still is really hard for me to talk about it, but I am grateful, however, that I had the choice. I am grateful that I had the choice because although it was very, very hard for me, and I think it was a big part of why I didn't win gold because I didn't think I deserved it. Wow. So the one race I lost, the Olympic final, was the race I wanted the most. When I lined up, I didn't feel deserving of being Olympic.
Why didn't you feel like you deserved it?
Because I had just done the one thing I thought I'd never do. And I feel like good things come from God, and I didn't deserve that. Can you imagine standing on the start line on the precipice of achieving your lifelong dream, and you know what you just did 2 weeks ago? It was awful. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I don't know what my life would have been like had I given up this dream that I had my whole life. I don't know if I would have been all of who I am today. Would I still have shown up in the world the way I do now?
So then would you say or submit in the figurative sense your abortion also saved your life?
Yeah.
Dr. Yeni, you are married, correct?
Yes, I am.
What exactly is your daily practice?
So I'm a pelvic floor therapist, and so what that means is I work with women who are dealing with bowel dysfunction, sexual dysfunction, reproductive issues. So this is pretty much up my alley. And so I often see women who are trying to conceive and often see women who are not trying to conceive.
So you literally spend every working hour of your day trying to help women conceive, yet you yourself had an abortion. Why?
So I was in this place where I desperately desired, to be able to have a family, but for whatever reason, God's timing, biological problems was stopping us from doing that. So, we're finally in this spot and we've prayed a lot, we've waited, we've given ourselves time, I've given my body rest, I'm exercising again, I'm eating right, I'm good. And we get pregnant again. And this time around, it wasn't really because of any medical intervention. So we were like, oh, this is great, this is perfect. I remember going for like 3 scans that week just to confirm, and we could not find baby. And then eventually on one of the scans, we did see baby, but the baby was trapped in my tube. And so the first thing she tells me, my doctor tells me is, I think that we are gonna either have to have surgery or we're gonna have to figure out a way to make this a medically sound abortion. And unfortunately, I was already so far in the pregnancy that it was looking like that was not gonna be an option for me anymore. And I was already 8 weeks. And so if you know anything about ectopic pregnancies, typically they rupture on their own as early as 7 weeks all the way up to 12 weeks. And so I was already in the very gray area. And I live in Texas, and unfortunately this was right around the time that the 6-week ban had started. And I remember having that difficult conversation with my doctor that you have to have a medical abortion, but I don't think I can give you one. And I thought, well, this is life-saving, like this is my life, And she's like, I know, but I don't think I can give you one. And so—
Why couldn't your doctor give you one?
Because she was afraid that either someone in her office was gonna make a call and say, there was she conducted a medical abortion, that there was gonna be a question of her medical reasoning. So we were going back and forth for 2 weeks, just trying to figure out how we could get this done. So suddenly she tells me, you know what, just come in after hours. Come in after hours. It's her, one trusted staff member. They essentially give me the medical abortion. I go home for the whole weekend and I lay in bed for 3 days as the pregnancy passes.
So you had to have an abortion in private?
I did.
Would you say that abortion saved your life?
Absolutely. We're talking about blood loss, we're talking about fatigue, migraines, so many hormonal issues, because you're literally going through a pregnancy withdrawal. So I think sometimes people underestimate, they think that, oh, there's just these silly girls making these flippant decisions, when sometimes we are educated, grown women who are making difficult decisions to save our lives.
Do you feel as though more women's lives will be jeopardized by the Supreme Court rule?
100%. Emmanuel, it's already happening. So I see that a lot of women are delaying these life-saving surgeries just out of fear and out of all this back and forth. If it took me 2 weeks to make that kind of decision last year, imagine what people are going through now.
Do you feel like this recent decision is an attack on women?
100%, I do. And not just women, but women who are minorities, women who are poor, communities who are poor, that don't have the privilege of finding an abortion clinic, of affording an abortion, or even just the access to the education of what their bodies do, of how their bodies work. There are so many women who, I've literally heard this firsthand, who have gotten pregnant, had no idea how. Because there was no education around them.
I feel humbled to sit with such incredible women with such beautiful, courageous stories and lives. I also very aware that I'm a white woman sitting here, and that whether it's the mortality rate of pregnant women of color or the amount of abortions that affect women of color is much more than white women. And so I'm listening to that with those ears as well.
If we can all be honest and uncomfortable, the church has been either extremely insensitive, or worse, they've been awfully quiet now.
Yes.
Chelsea, why do you think that is?
I can tell you why I've been quiet. I feel very humbled. And I don't know sometimes the fine line between humbled and humiliated. I'm a person who follows the teachings of Jesus, and one of those teachings says that we weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And in this moment, I feel completely humbled and do not know how to follow that teaching. It just seems impossible to be able to do that in this moment. And I am embarrassed by some of the rejoicing at the cost of somebody's pain.
Chelsea, in light of all of these heartbreaking and really gut-wrenching stories, what role can and should the church play to support those now that are not empowered to make the decision?
As I think about the story of Jesus with a woman who was caught in the midst of adultery, and that's very much a woman-based story in the Bible, because she was caught in the very act. So where was the man in this story? Very similar to a woman facing an unwanted pregnancy. She just can be left alone, the same way this woman was left alone. And in this moment, Jesus didn't say anything. It's one of the beautiful silent moments of Jesus. And he just got down and wrote in the dirt. And then he's just said this incredible statement. He said, "Let him who is without sin throw the first stone." And I think as Christians, as faith leaders, as community leaders, we need to be really in touch with our own shortcomings and our own weaknesses, so that we aren't prone to just chucking those stones because it feels good.
Sanya, we're currently focused on the physical pain. That's what the world has really chosen to hone in on. But there's an emotional toll
Oh, yeah.
that nobody speaks of.
Yeah. One of the other emotions that we went through that was really raw and real was when we wanted to start having a kid, it wasn't happening. And I thought, am I being punished for this abortion? And, I think it's like, I want to be a great person. Like, I want to be, you set these standards for yourself and you want to.
Did you feel like you weren't being a great person by
I
having an
did.
abortion?
I did. I felt like I fell short of the standards I set for myself.
Wow.
Your husband, incredible man, former teammate of my own, 2-time Super Bowl champion in his own right, Aaron Ross. Does he ever resent you for the decision you made for robbing him of his dream in that moment?
And not that he speaks about. I don't think so. I really feel genuinely that my husband understood the situation that we were in.
Yeah.
We were in. This was something that we had done together. At the time, Ross and I were not planning to start a family. That was not on our to-do list. And so I do feel like my husband realized we were in this together. The part about that was always challenging for me, however, and I write about it in my book, is that he never ever said, do it.
Wow.
And I think a part of it for him was if I never actually say it, in some ways I remove the burden of having an abortion. So
Is that unfair to you?
very unfair. And when I wrote my book, it was very hard. Like I told him how in those moments, as much as I thought he was being as supportive as he could, there were times when I did feel unsupported. Yeah. Because for him, it was kind of like happening, but I was there. You know what I mean? Even though I do feel like we were in agreement, he never actually said the words. Yeah. And I think it was for his own consciousness. And I wish I had that option too. I didn't have that option.
When you just mentioned that your husband never said, do it, when I had an abortion, my partner at the time said, do it.
Yeah.
So it was a completely different, where I felt unsupported in a completely different way. Yes, pressured, but it that sort of blew my mind.
And you know what? I appreciate you saying that because maybe it's better he did it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like this idea of like, I feel that very deeply when you say that, and maybe I should be more appreciative of the fact that he did it, because I think he would have supported me either way. So that's actually a beautiful
no question
thing.
that your husband would have. Obviously, you guys are in a healthy marriage, but in that moment, I felt I carried a lot of resentment because of that.
As the resident ignorant male, what role do you all want men to play? Do you want them to shut up? Or do you want them to speak up?
That's a great question.
Good.
That's a great question. Somebody else answer first.
Well, I mean, I'll be the first to say that I do want them to speak up, but I want them to be informed. Because what I am seeing right now is just a high level of ignorance and assumptions.
The person who's involved should speak up, and the ones who aren't should shut up.
Yeah.
And I think I mean that in the sense of, I feel like it should be a conversation and a decision with the two people who are involved, right? I think that as my husband, fiance, he should tell me how he really feels and what we should do. We should agree on it together. I don't think that it should be for anybody else to speak on somebody else's decision.
That's right.
I think, like MJ said so eloquently, like we are autonomous, we are intelligent, we are smart, and I think it is unfair for somebody who I have never met, who cares nothing about me, to make a decision about my body. Yeah.
Now, Chelsea, your church, Churchome, does a phenomenal job empowering its women. But for the most part, within the church in America, men are at the forefront. Men run the church. Men have been very vocal. Men. How can churches that are predominantly run by men actually make educated decisions and comments and support in these moments?
I think you are modeling it right now.
Yeah, 100%.
And that is stopping, asking questions, listening. And don't you think it's such a skill to know what you don't know? It's kind of a lost art these days. Like you said, we process everything online and pretend like we have to know everything about knowing everything. And thank you for admitting that you are a man who does not have a clue what it's like to be pregnant or carry a woman in your But you're modeling it.
Yeah.
Stopping, listening, asking questions.
Yeah.
It's so refreshing.
What do you think the role of men should be in everything that's happening? What do you think that men should be doing right now?
Well, it's twofold. I fervently believe that justice will not be served until those that are unaffected are as outraged as those that are affected.
That's good.
And so after we identify what justice looks like, I think those men that are unaffected need to be as outraged as those women that are affected.
Right.
The second thing I always think about is you have to be slow to speak and quick to listen.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm honored to share this space with you all, because as a man, this for me is just a time of listening. This is a time of trying to broadcast you all stories. This is a time of shining and shedding light on ignorance, because there are so many different reasons that a woman is faced with that decision of having an abortion. And like Sanya said, no woman wants to have an abortion. You are just faced with a decision. So I think my position is always listen first, digest, and then with competence, open up and speak. Pro-choice, pro-life. By saying I am pro-choice, it's implying that I am anti-life.
Yeah.
Right.
But the choice you made literally saved your life.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the nuance of pro-choice, pro-life, in your opinion?
I'll just start with the fact that we have lawmakers that are making very legal decisions about a very medical, problem, and it takes away all of the complexities, and it just completely reduces it to abortion, no abortion. Like, that's it. And as you can tell with just the stories that we've shared, how complex it really is. And I can tell you that there are so many people that are walking through difficult decisions every day that are so complex and so layered that a law should not have the audacity to approach, right? And so I think for me, what is the most disheartening thing right now is because it's this overturning of Roe versus Wade has eliminated the nuance, has now said you've got to either be on one side or the other. And if you're not on the right side, per the law, you're in trouble.
It's like people think it's pro-life, pro-abortion. That's almost what it feels like to me sometimes. Like, if you're not pro-life, you're pro-abortion. I'm like, no. Like, to me, pro-choice introduces and infuses the nuances and compassion.
Yeah.
Right? It allows for compassion because situations vary based on experiences.
I feel it's about power and control, more so than anything
Yeah.
else. And so that is the part that I just can't sit with and be silent about. Because multiple things can be true. You can hold space for a lot of different things. You can love God, you can be a member of your church, you can choose to have an abortion, and you can still be a good person, all at the same time. And a multitude of other things all at once.
So, Chelsea, so many Christians look to a passage of scripture which says you were knit in your mother's womb. And they stand on that and say abortion is wrong. How can a Christian or somebody who identifies and lives their life by biblical text simultaneously read that passage but still empathize with women that are hurting or that have hurt?
I have so much empathy and understanding for followers of Jesus who would say, I believe that life begins at conception. And I believe that stopping an abortion is saving a life. Saving a life is a very valid cause. But that's not the only life that we're called to save. If you're pro-life,
Wow.
there's a lot of life. It's also taking one verse and making that one verse, Psalm 139, making that as black and white as the verses of the forgiveness and love of Jesus Christ. It's one verse versus thousands and thousands of verses that are in the Bible. And we have a conviction is when we look at the Bible is we put the emphasis where God puts the emphasis. And he puts the emphasis on love. He puts the emphasis on forgiveness. He puts the emphasis on compassion. And so as a follower of Jesus, wouldn't I put the emphasis there?
In conclusion, I want to ask you all each one final question, and it's very simple. How has this conversation helped you?
This conversation has helped me put stories and faces and real life dilemmas behind statistics. And And I think statistics can be such a depersonalizing force. Numbers, they're not faces, they're not names, they're not stories yet, but yet each one of you have faces and names and souls. And so thank you for sharing those. And I just feel more humbled.
It's definitely restored a little bit more hope in me, because I was in the dumps before this. I was like, I mean, there's so much crazy happening in this country, and then this.
Yeah. Right.
But just hearing, kind of like what Pastor Chelsea said, hearing everyone's stories, I feel affirmed, I feel protected, because this has definitely brought a form of like nakedness as a woman, just a vulnerability that I didn't ask for. And this has definitely kind of helped me feel more protected again.
MJ, how has this conversation helped you?
This conversation has helped me remember why it's important for us to speak to one another and not at one another.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to things that are so visceral and so major in all of our lives.
Yeah.
My dear friend Sanya, how has this conversation helped you?
Well, first of all, I got to thank you for having this conversation and inviting us all to your table.
100%.
This has been incredible. Everything that you have been doing with Uncomfortable Conversations has been incredible. This conversation made me feel seen, heard, loved, and supported. At the end of the day, I don't think that this is a partisan issue. I don't feel like this has to do with race or color. I really think this is about us as the human race coming back together and having empathy for one another. Supporting each other, even when it's not something that we think we would do, something that we would want to do, that doesn't matter. It is about your sister next to you and what she is going through and how we can support her.
Well, Sanya, thank you, genuinely. Dr. Yeni, thank you. Chelsea, thank you. MJ, thank you. And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Uncomfortable Conversations with Emmanuel Acho. The objective was never to change your mind, but hopefully through this dialogue, we've opened it. Regardless of where you fall on the ledger, just remember, we have to live life together. So continue to live a life with grace, with love, and with empathy. We'll see you next time.